All right, and welcome to another episode of Butler's Babble. Today we got a great show for you, but just a reminder, we are live streaming live to both our Facebook page and to our YouTube channel. So if you are going to make any comments or you're going to make any questions for our guest Valerie today, make sure that you go to StreamYard/Facebook. So www.streamyard.com/Facebook and give them permission to use your name so we know who you are. I do have it open on the side here, so I will know who you are. But if we bring you up here, we'd like to show your name if we can. And I'm sure Valerie would love to answer some questions for you. But today's guest, we have Valerie J. Walsh, all the way from Connecticut. How are you, Valerie?
I'm doing well, John. I'm coming to you live from my master bathroom.
I love it. See, people will do anything to get on this program. I'm telling you, they'll even
Oh
go
my.
right to their bathroom.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, I'm glad you're here. I know when I saw the whole I saw your profile come up to me on a podcast group, and I thought this is a person I definitely have to get on because it totally goes with our theme of empower, motivate, and inspire. Because our goal is to try and motivate people to get out of that little rut that they have throughout their lives. We all go through little ups and downs. We all have times when we feel like, what's going on here? And it's how we get through that that defines who we are. And I think your story is one that people can learn from. So I'm just happy that you agreed to come on with us.
Yeah. All right.
All right. So why don't we get a little bit of a background on little Valerie? What Valerie was like as a child, where you grew up, what your family was like. Give us a little background.
It's so funny that you said little Valerie because that was actually one of my nicknames growing up.
Oh,
Val Jean the Lima Bean. Because I'd stopped growing it like 5 feet. I think I made it to about 5'2", and I swear I think I'm shrinking every day, like in height, not in width. But anyhow, yeah, I grew up in Syracuse, New York,
okay.
and I was my mom was a very young mother. She found out she was pregnant with my sister actually when she was 18, senior
Ooh.
year of high school. I think it was like right around junior prom she found out that she was pregnant, and her and my biological father, like right after the story goes, that I heard, was pretty much right after, prom night. She's like, "Oh, and by the way, we're
Oh,
pregnant."
by the way.
By the way. And so yeah, so she was just a really young mom, and her and my father they got married because
Mhm.
back in the early 70s, that's what you did, right? You just
Exactly.
did the next right thing.
Yeah.
And we got married, and then had my sister. And then 2 months after, see, we're Irish twins, we're 11 months apart. So 2 months after having my sister,
Hmm.
they found out they were pregnant again with little
Mm.
Val. So here she was, a young mom with two girls by 19 years old.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
Definitely
she,
couldn't have been easy.
it was not easy, but I have to say that there was more happy memories than chaos, although the
Good.
chaos was pretty tough,
Hmm.
pretty serious issues. But my mom, she was like, anybody that would met her would describe her as the most fun loving, giving, working woman. She was lucky enough when we were living in Syracuse in like my formative years. My parents' marriage didn't work out. I think they lasted for maybe 3 years. My
Okay.
biological father, and I say that because he didn't remain in my life, but you know, all love there, forgiveness there. I know he was also just young and he
Hmm.
wasn't equipped at the time, but for circumstances that I had no control over, he wasn't in my life. So in my formative years, when my mom became a single mom, she was blessed enough to have my grandparents,
Okay.
her mom and her dad, and she had two sisters, my aunts, and my uncle Bill, who was only 11 months younger than me. So these were like my aunts and my uncles are more like I swear, like my siblings. Like we
Okay.
joke around about that. Like they they grew up raising us. So when my mom had to go to work, we were left with my grandparents and my aunts, my uncles, and I have really great memories of, being in my grandparents' home in Syracuse and being raised between my mom and them for my formative years, most of my toddler, elementary school, that time.
Okay.
And then my mom remarried when I was about 5 years old, and we moved away from that area of Syracuse to another part of town. and she married a not so good man who was my stepfather.
Okay.
And during that time, my grandparents moved. And
Okay.
that was like a shift in a lot of things for my
Hmm.
family.
And what year was this, did you say?
I would
Roughly?
say this was roughly early 80s.
Okay.
Early 80s. So, I watched my mom ebb and flow from being happy and putting on that facade of everything being fine, right? And
Mhm.
that's why, like, people who know me, they know that I hate that word fine. It's like right up there with moist for
Yeah.
me. Because no one knew, like, this woman was just, putting on this brave face, but behind closed doors, after she was done working really hard to put food on the table and protect us from what was really going on, in their marriage and what she was struggling with as a woman,
Hmm.
being married to a guy that was unfaithful and had his own addiction issues with cocaine and rage. And
Hmm.
although he never was physically violent to us, the two of them were just not good for one another.
Hmm.
So she was putting on this, facade for, I would say a good 10 years of their marriage, that we witnessed her go to work and come home at night and drink and pass
Okay.
out. And so it was tough. The those years, I would say, you know, when people who know me now that I went to school with, and when my book came out, they're like, "We just never knew, Valerie." Well, of course. I would think most people could say that. It's
Yeah.
like you never know what goes on behind closed doors.
Exactly. You hear that all the time.
Yeah, because my mom was the most available person
Hmm.
to everyone around her. She wasn't taking care of herself.
Exactly.
So
So
my
she wasn't
house,
living. She wasn't happy. She was just
no.
surviving.
Yeah, she was just surviving. She
Yeah.
wasn't thriving at all. But my house was the house that people wanted to come to, because my mom was this Girl Scout leader, cookie making, gardener. Like, on the outside, everything looked put together. She
Hmm.
kept all the balls in the air until she couldn't anymore.
Yeah. And exactly. And that's the thing too. When you look at, you even see it with a lot of celebrities and that, and you see like people like Robin Williams, things like that. They always look like, oh, they must have the best life. They're making all this money. He's always got a smile on his face. He's making
Right.
everybody laugh, and yet he was the one that was struggling the most, and nobody knew it. So
Yeah.
I can see where you're coming from. I can't say that I've lived it, but I could see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So that was
So
mostly your teen years, I take it.
that was most of my teen years. And then by the time my parents sat us down, they sat us down and told us they were getting divorced. My sister and I were like, thank God. Like, we're like, good. Like my mom and my sister and I are like, we got this. Like, this is
Yeah.
what we know.
Yeah.
Like that word surrender that we'll get into later, that was like you don't surrender, you keep going, you keep fighting. So my sister and my mom and I, we just moved on. We're like, okay, it's
Hmm.
back to the three of us, just like it was in the beginning. There she is. Look at how beautiful. She's so beautiful. So
All
my
three of the little
mom,
trio there.
oh my gosh, and it was just, we were like, the three musketeers. And
Hmm.
so we went from, kind of circled back to where we started, the three of us, and we moved into an apartment above. It was like a split level apartment. It was funny because the guy that lived downstairs with his parents, I went to high school with.
Oh, okay.
And so it was fun. Like, we're like, okay, oh, we're moving to that house. I know the guy that lives downstairs. And that was when I was 15. And then my sister was very, very good in school. She was, academically driven, did the right thing. I was more of a black sheep.
Hmm.
We went from having separate bedrooms in our house that we moved from, to now sharing a bedroom.
Okay.
And we butted heads, but we were super close. Like, we
Yeah.
were the type of siblings that was like, I could say whatever I want about my sister, but don't you even come close, because we had
Yeah.
each other back.
Yep.
So good Irish twins there. But
Well, I have two daughters myself. They're 6 years apart, but even when the youngest one was bugging the crap out of her older sister because she was high school and the other one wasn't, if anybody was picking on the younger one at school, the older one was coming over to find out what was going on, because you don't pick on my sister. That's my job.
oh yeah, that's my job, and it's game on, right? So Monica went on to college, and I'll tell you right now, I had my first beer at 15 years old.
Okay.
And they say, in the recovery group that I go to, that alcoholics will remember their first drink. And that's true for this alcoholic. I
Mm-hmm.
remember I opened up the refrigerator. My mom was an alcoholic, whether or not, I shouldn't take somebody else's inventory, but it was quite evident that she had a problem with alcohol. And she had rows of beers available. So I knew if I stole one, she probably wouldn't remember. So I decided I was going to choose the best beer and probably grab like a Milwaukee's Best or Utica Club because, I grew up in central New York. So anyhow, I grabbed a beer and I chugged it. And I can tell you, John, right then and there, I was like, oh, this is what I'm missing. Like,
Mm.
like this is what I'm missing. I'm fun now. I'm confident now. Like, like all the things that I didn't feel at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. People like, now that I'm being so truthful about my past and my present, and people who knew me back then are like, what do you mean you had no self-confidence? What do you mean you had no passion? What do you mean? Like, they didn't see that, and I was like, oh, you have no idea. I used to drink to go and meet you at the party, and I probably had some roadies on the way
Mm-hmm.
because I was so riddled with anxiety, which we now know is social anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
that I drank to fit in and give me the things in my life that I was missing. So for this alcoholic, I knew right away after I started going to my recovery program that I was probably an alcoholic right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
So at 15 years old, I chugged my first beer and I called up my two guy best friends. And then we did what you did back then in the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
we just walked the neighborhood and just
Yeah.
like,
Exactly. See what's going on. Were you a
going on.
goofy drunk? Were you a laughing drunk
I
or?
was I'll tell you, I was fun. I was, like I had fun until I didn't anymore, but that's how I got away with it for so
Yeah.
long, because you just convince yourself like, oh, you're supposed to be partying like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Especially as
you
a teenager.
yeah. So I like to talk about that time because it's important that you plant those seeds,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of teenagers I talk to, and I do
Mm-hmm.
podcasts and I go to other forums and I do a lot of public speaking. And what I'm learning now is there's that age group, or like, a functional alcoholic, or
Mm-hmm.
that's how it started. And I just like to plant those seeds because I never really heard that growing up.
No.
When I was in high school, it was always the extreme stories that came in.
Yes.
You had the public speaker of somebody who went to jail
Yep.
and like, had a really scary story that tried to scare you straight. And you're like, whoa, that could never happen to me.
No, exactly. And I know I grew up in the 80s in the high school and junior high myself. And I know, and I grew up in a big city. I grew up in the Toronto area, a little town, a city called Brampton, just outside of Toronto, but it's huge. And we were the same way. I mean, high school, you drink, because I'm thinking 15, you're around grade 10, grade 9, grade 10 in that
Yeah.
area. And so that was the partying era. You went to house parties and you went to
Field parties,
field
bonfires.
parties, a lot of them, yeah, and you drank, and that was the
Yeah.
whole thing. And it was the type of thing where people like, oh, you got to stop drinking. Oh, I can stop anytime I
Right.
wanted to. But and you didn't. It was a social thing
Yeah.
to
Yep.
fit
And I
in.
was, and I'm sure that there were the nights where, you could ask some people I graduated with and be like, no, you weren't always fun. You know what I mean? Like there were the nights where we were taking you home, Valerie, and those who really knew me dear enough and knew when when in my sobriety and when I went back and I, you know, and talked to those dear friends, they're like, you know what? They weren't shocked.
Hmm.
They weren't shocked because you always know those handful of people who are like, oh, she's going to get wasted at the end of the night. Oh, I'm going to have to walk her home, make sure she gets home safe. Yeah, I'm your girl.
Yeah.
But I was fun. I really was fun.
Yeah, no, I know. I was a late bloomer. Like I did it in my high school years, but it wasn't more until my late teens and early 20s where I started doing more of the partying and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't go down to that one devil hole as they call it.
Yeah.
I was able to control it and get myself on, but I know people that didn't get back on, and
Yeah.
we even had a guest on here. Oh, it would have been about 4 months ago as our second guest, my friend Rob out of Sudbury, and that was his thing. He got into alcohol around the same age as you, and that was he got into robbing houses and breaking into cars, anything to get his alcohol fixed. People don't understand as a teenager. Sometimes it's even worse than when you're adult. They're like, "Oh, teenagers can never get that bad." But when
Mm.
you're in a situation like yourself, you're just trying to, like your mom did earlier on. She was just trying to survive. You were just high
Yeah.
school trying to survive your own little inner demons, probably.
And I really don't think, and when it started for me, it wasn't to like cover up any pain that like, that I can really, it was really, for me, it started off with giving me that, what I needed to feel comfortable in my skin. So when I talk to young people, I say, what could help, one of the things that could help is developing a passion for something, and I didn't have that. I was really going through the motions, and it wasn't because I wasn't well supported. My mother supported whatever my sister and I wanted to do. I just wasn't in me yet.
Yes.
So I did the next thing, so, okay, you go and you graduate, and I went to college. I failed out of college. I made it a year and a half, and I partied. I mean, this is back in, early 90s, where there weren't cell phones, and,
Yeah.
our parents didn't know our location. You weren't in, you had a calling card, and you certainly, you saved it either to call your friends, and maybe if you're lucky, your parents would hear from you once a week. So there was a lot of leeway and a lot of freedom to, for the trouble to get ahead,
to experiment.
To experiment. And that's what happened. And it was really alcohol for me. And I wasn't going to class. And about a year and a half into my college career, I flunked out. And so from there, I moved back to Syracuse for a short time. But by that time, my mom had moved to Connecticut, because remember, I said my family, her mom and dad, they retired to Connecticut. So she decided that she was going to come back to Connecticut and have some more support. And so she moved in with her parents, and she had this basement apartment. And so when things weren't working out for me in Syracuse, I'm like, what am I going to do now? Like, what's next? All my friends were in college. All my good friends were doing pretty well for themselves. And little Val was pretty lost. So I decided I was going to join my mom in Connecticut. And it was supposed to be for a short time. I was helping to take care of my grandfather. He was type 1 diabetic. My grandfather was actually one of the first people to be diagnosed with diabetes, type 1 diabetes. And that's a whole nother story. They didn't expect him to even live that long, or, have children. He had 4 children. He had a full career. And then he did pass away in his late 60s, but he had a full, vibrant, awesome life. And so anyhow, during the months where he fell ill and we knew that he was going to be in hospice, I decided to stay. And ended up.
Was your sister back there with you guys at the time, or?
Nope. My sister went to school in Casanova, and she got her degree in accounting and management, and she went on to have start her career. So, and she was doing, very well for herself.
Good.
Yep.
So it's just you and your mom, and you're there, and your dad or your grandfather's gone to the hospice.
Yeah, my grandfather actually was lucky enough we kept him at home. So it was my grandparents and my mom and myself were in the basement. And I say that because it is significant. Like, we're in the basement, and it was like just this not a good place for us to be, because then we started kind of hanging out, and now I'm an adult of drinking age, so we can drink together, right? So isn't that?
So your mom was still drinking at this time from before?
Yes. I mean, she would go through periods of trying to abstain from alcohol, but I never really remember her having any periods of sobriety. And we can get into that later, but I know the timeline of when everything really fell apart. And that's why I have such a passion for speaking on the preventative end, because although mental illness is super, super complex, and I know some of the things I talk about, people are like, well, you can't exercise your way out of a depression. Well, that's true. If you're in the active state of a very severe depression, that's a whole different ball of wax. You need professional help, and no, you're not going to get up and run on the treadmill and it's all going to be better. But there are things that we're going to do to work on a preventative end. And I use my grandfather's diabetes as an example. Like, if you know that you're diabetic, you're not going to pick up a bag of jelly beans, right?
No, exactly.
Unless you raise your blood sugar. I know that I'm susceptible to acute depression, mild depression, and anxiety. So I shouldn't be drinking alcohol. I can't drink safely. Like, there's just certain things I know I can work on every day and pick up as a tool, and not pick up to live a healthy life physically and mentally. So in my early 20s, I moved to Connecticut. Um, I worked, odd jobs here and there. I developed a really huge passion for the outdoors when
Good.
I moved here. So that was very helpful to keep me,
Mm-hmm.
keep me going. I growing up in Syracuse, there's beautiful areas in Syracuse, but my family wasn't very outdoorsy.
Mm-hmm.
But when I first moved to Connecticut, I remember like my 21st birthday, I went out to a pub. So I say that because like if you turn 21 in Syracuse, you're going to go downtown to
Yes.
Armory Square and you're going to go clubbing. You're going to go from
Yes.
bar to bar. And I remember when I went out to this pub and I got home, and again, this is pre-cell phone, and I called my best friend Kimberly in tears. I'm like, you won't believe this. I went to this pub and he had a pool table and we played darts and there was a big one. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, we didn't like go to anywhere else. It's like the only pub in town. And I was
Yeah.
like
So you didn't
miserable.
bar hop, you just stayed at the one place.
I was like miserable when I first moved here because I just thought, like, what do you mean? The mall's a half an hour away? Like,
Yeah.
where am I? And it just took me a little while. But anyhow, I in my early 20s, I got some odd jobs. I ended up working at this gym that was
Mm-hmm.
just opening up. And from there, my career took off in fitness, and it
Good.
all really started with working the front desk and literally working all the areas of the gym, from facilities to front desk to being encouraged to get my certification. And then it went on from there. So that's how I got started professionally in fitness.
That's amazing because it's I always say certain things lead you to the path where you're going to be, and it's
Mhm.
just of how you can help the directory, but sometimes it just comes to you
Oh yeah.
with your upbringing and your surroundings and things like that. And I know the feeling because I'm actually in a small town right now. I'm about an hour and a half west of Ottawa, Canada, and about 5 hours north of Toronto. So
Oh
I'm in this
wow.
little small town. It's a military town, and but I grew up in the Toronto area, the Greater Toronto area, where you got millions of people all the time. And in my 30s, I moved to Edmonton for 3 years, which is another big town in Canada. And
Yep.
then I moved here, and I'm like, where is everything? So I know, and you wonder what's going to happen, and sometimes that's even worse because in your situation, the way you were, to move in a town like that, and you don't know where anything, there's nothing to do. It's going to lead you to some bad things sometimes.
Yeah. Well, that's what happened. So again, like my story is not uncommon.
Hmm.
Here I am in my 20s now. And again, still partying, work hard, work during the week, play
Hmm.
hard on the weekends. And it was okay that I was getting wasted on the weekends because I'm in my 20s. That's what you
Yeah,
do. And I want
exactly.
to tell another little story because this is an example of how planting the seeds is so important. So if you know somebody in your life that you think is drinking too much, you don't want to preach, right? None of us
Mhm.
like being preached to. But there are significant moments in my life where people pulled me aside, and this is one of them. So at this point, I was teaching fitness classes. I hadn't gone for my personal training certification yet, but I was opening up the gym at 5:30 in the morning, had to be there at 5 in the morning. And then I would open up and work the front desk. And then the next person would come in and I'd go teach like the 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock classes or whatever it was. And I'm like in my early 20s. And I remember this one morning, this trainer pulled me aside and he goes, can I talk to you for a second? And it was somebody I really respected.
Hmm.
And he pulled me in the break room and he goes, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you reek of alcohol. I know you were partying the night before. I'm like, and
Yeah.
okay, I'm 22. And he's like, you're better than this. He's like, you've got everything ahead of you, Valerie. He's
Yep.
like, I just want you to know that I think a lot of you. And I just, and he saw it. And I'm just
Hmm.
like, whatever, and just, went about my day. But and people ask me, like, well, did you get sober after that? Well, no.
No.
But here 20 years later,
Yeah.
because I became sober in September 2017, I messaged him and I let him know what that meant to me. It really was one of those moments in my life where I'm like, it mattered. Like in
Yeah.
sobriety, I look back at that and be like, thank you for saying that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's an important thing to talk about.
as some people, whether you're religious or not, some people say you're sent angels here and there to help you through certain situations, and he maybe was an angel that you just weren't ready to listen to at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So, so then I met my husband a few years in working at this gym. He became a client, not a client of mine. He became a member of the gym, I should say, and we flirted from here and there, that kind of thing. And I also worked not only as a trainer, but I was a trainer at that point. I also worked as a bartender at the restaurant that he was a chef at. So he was a chef, and I worked seasonal work. And I remember I was coming to the end of my, I think it was like whatever said, like I worked like the holiday season, and it was coming to an end, and everyone kept telling me like he had a crush on me and we should connect. And he was so shy, which is funny because everybody who knows him were like, no way. I'm like, well, when it came to me, he was super, super shy. So I was in my mid-20s, and the way the restaurant was, the bar was upstairs and the main dining room was downstairs. And like we had a back stairway that food runners, like that's where you ran food and whatever. And so we crossed each other in the middle of the stairwell. And I said, tonight's my last night. I'm going to be done for the season. I'm like, we should go out sometime. And so technically I asked my husband out, and then the first date was this huge, huge Italian wedding. He's like, his aunt was getting married or something. He's like, actually next weekend I have a wedding to go to. Would you like to be my date? So we started dating in the late 90s, and we were married in 1999, and we're still married to this day with 2 beautiful children.
That's awesome. I like hearing stories like that. Now, do you think that meeting him, getting married, having a family, that changed your whole outlook on things, or?
Well, not my outlook on things. I think I was, I had a wonderful life. I went through periods of where I could say I'd stopped drinking. I didn't drink often.
Yes.
But when I did, I would drink to get drunk.
Yeah.
So that's how it was like for me. Like I could go months without drinking at times. When I was pregnant, obviously I didn't drink. When the kids were little, I didn't drink. Mm-hmm. But then, and I wasn't the type of alcoholic that drank when things got really bad. In fact, it was opposite for me. My anxiety was something that didn't allow me to do that. Like I knew I had to be present. So there were moments in my life. So I got married in 1999, and I had my daughter, and I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer in 2002. Okay. During that entire time, I didn't drink because, I abstained from alcohol, not because I was acknowledging the fact that I had a problem with alcohol. I was trying to be in good health to undergo thyroid surgery. So what had happened was, my daughter was like a year old, and I was still exhausted all the time. I was so tired. And I actually thought like, do I have chronic fatigue syndrome? Like, this is like ridiculous. I had the baby now a year ago. I should start to be feeling a little bit back to myself. Mm-hmm. And then the telltale sign for me was she got pink eye. And she was like, I think she was like 16 months old. And I caught it from her, and I couldn't get rid of it. And I'm like, something's going on here. So I went to my primary care physician, and she did an exam. And then she's like, well, if you're feeling tired, we should check your thyroid. That's a pretty common thing with women to, I shouldn't say with women, but men and women. Yeah. And I knew nothing about the thyroid gland and what it was responsible for. And as she's putting, her fingers over my throat, she found, what are you doing? Like, I'm tired. Why? But she found this little like pea-sized nodule. Okay. Yeah, and she said, it's probably nothing, but I'm going to send you for an ultrasound. We'll get it checked out. And then the ultrasound came back abnormal. They did a biopsy, and they discovered I had papillary thyroid cancer in 2002. So very treatable with surgery. I had the surgery. I had radioactive iodine to like clean up any of the cancerous thyroid tissue that they're not able to get with surgery. And that put me in good health. And at the time, I was also training for the New York City Marathon. Oh. So I was able to complete it. So I was like, I made a really good recovery. And I can't really remember, like in the early 2000s, really drinking that often. So my drinking career, so to speak, kind of ebbed and flowed. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a disease of progression. Yes. For me, it didn't get very bad. there were 2 times it got very bad. Before I lost my mom, and then directly after when I
Okay.
lost my
And that brings us, I guess, to another stage in your life. I mean, I guess after that whole thyroid thing, you're getting better, you're healing from that. Life is good. And then 2013 comes around and you're hit with another bombshell.
Yeah. So in May 2013, my mother died by suicide.
Okay.
And I want to talk about the language of that, John,
Yes.
because it's something that I learned actually from a suicide survivor. When I wrote my manuscript, I sent it out, and I sent it out first to a copy editor that cleaned it up and grammatically cleaned it up and told me to dig a little bit deeper and whatnot. And then I also sent parts of it to this woman that I really respect, and she's a suicide survivor. And she said, Valerie, you wrote all in here committed suicide. As mental health advocates, we know not to say that because we believe mental health is a disease, just like any other disease, just like we talked about earlier, like diabetes. So, your mother's depression or your mother's suicide was the final symptom of her massive, serious depression that was going untreated, right? So you would never say somebody, committed diabetes or somebody committed cancer, just the way you would say nobody committed, suicide. So I didn't know that. So, I'd like to, bring that up because I had to do a whole global edit of my entire manuscript because, when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
So I like to share that important language. So in 2013, my mother died by suicide. It wasn't, a shock to us. This was a decades of her mental illness going untreated. And I want to say that again, untreated and overtreated, because we know better now.
Yes.
When she started taking those happy pills to calm down in the early 70s, they were Valium and they weren't monitored without any follow-up of speaking to a therapist.
Okay.
So now, things are different now. When people are put on controlled substances, which I do believe in medicine. I believe we have medicine for a reason. I believe we have therapists for a reason. I believe that psychiatrists handle medicine for the brain. I believe your primary care doctor handles other things.
Yes.
So my mother didn't have any of that. She was not taking care of herself. The timeline of her life came ever so clear to me when we lost her in 2013, and I was putting together the photos for her memorial. And I could see exactly when she fell down that rabbit hole was when she literally fell and broke both ankles and wasn't able to physically recover because the damage she had already done to her body from her years of abuse of alcohol and pills had already taken its toll.
Okay.
So unfortunately for her, because she didn't get the help early on that she needed, it was just a progression. So when she was my age now, the last 8 years of her life were the most horrendous struggle.
Okay.
Where she was now on disability. She was now borderline agoraphobic.
Okay.
She was drinking more than I had ever seen her drink. And then she would try to cold turkey stop and have seizures. So it was a very, very dark, final years of her life. Yeah. So when we did lose her in May, it wasn't like it hit us, upside the head, like, because everyone's situation is different. Some people,
for sure,
when they lose somebody, they're like, we just never saw it. With my mother, we did. Yeah. But you can't force help on somebody.
No, it's very true. I think my dad, before he passed away, now he passed away of natural causes, and that it was, well, not natural, but he had, what do you call it? Pneumonia is what caused it from his smoking and all that stuff. He died from pneumonia, but we think the last 10 to 20 years of his life, he had a lot of mental issues going on within himself that he was battling too. So now, was your mom, those last, say, 10, 15 years while in Connecticut, was she more of at that time just a stay-home body, didn't go out much? If she did, it was either just to get alcohol, go to the doctors to get her medications, that kind of stuff? Or did she do anything else other than just sit at home? Or
I mean, she ended up moving back to Syracuse. She actually passed away in Syracuse.
Oh, okay.
Because it's like one of those things where she thought, well, now, like, she was still a fighter. You know what I mean? She was like, well, maybe if I move back, things will change. But, we know you take yourself everywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's true. Very true. Everywhere.
So, but she, my daughter has wonderful memories of my mom. She
Good.
was a wonderful Nana. And we had a relationship where I just loved her for who she was
Mm-hmm.
when we had her. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't out to change
Yep.
her. I kind of knew in my heart of hearts we probably wouldn't have her forever. But the times that she could come to my house and paint my daughter's toenails and fingernails and watch movies with us, we soaked
That's
up.
awesome.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? We didn't have a relationship that ever was broken because of her circumstances.
No, I'm glad to hear
You
that.
know, we had struggles, and I will
Sure.
tell you, we fought. But if you ask my daughter, she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I remember Nana this, blah 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 blah. She made me this. She knitted me scarves." And like anyone who worked with her in
Yeah.
Connecticut, because she was a very well respected medical receptionist that fought hard for people who needed their insurance coverage for things.
Yep.
So her job wasn't fun, and she was awesome at it. So if
Yep.
you ask anybody here, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, your mother was a saint," and she was.
Exactly.
But the last few years of her life when she was on disability and she wasn't working and she was home more were harder. So she was
Yes.
more present in my daughter's life, less present in my son's life, just because he
Mm-hmm.
was younger. And by that time, it was very tough. She was back in Syracuse as well at
Mm-hmm.
that time. And that's where she passed away, in Syracuse.
And it brings up the point that you and I talked before we came on the air too, is we look at people, and I guess to you guys, you said it wasn't something that was unexpected, but
Yeah.
to the other people out there that knew her at work or instead she's such a sweetheart they saw her as this happy-go-lucky person that had a great life, had two beautiful daughters, had beautiful grandchildren, and it's those people that, like you said, you have to look out for the most, because sometimes the ones that show that they're happy, show the smiling all the time, they're the ones that sometimes are fighting things inside and are hurting the most.
Yep. Yep. I'm pretty direct with people now, when I'll ask them, like, people never know what to say, and I get that. But if I think somebody's, going through something, I'll just say to them, like, "Are you okay? No, how are you really?"
Mm-hmm.
And, or I might like send a random text to somebody, like just checking in, because I've had the closest people in my life who know that I'm an open book, and I will talk about suicide as comfortably as I will talk about the pimple on my forehead. Like that's what my mission is. You know what I mean? Like we're going to talk about this stuff
Yes.
because it is my dream someday that we're going to talk about mental illness issues as comfortable as we would talk about if you had COVID last week. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like we need to talk about this stuff.
We do. And it's
So
come a long way. It's just still
yeah.
not there yet, but it has, compared to when you and I were in high school. That was something you never talked about.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's come a long way, but I've been starkly reminded we're so far from there, because I've had a couple people close in my life, even recently, where I'm like, really? Like,
yeah,
how could you not be talking about it?
yeah.
And it's just it's still tough, but we're gonna keep going, John.
No, exactly. Good. I'm glad. So your mom passes away, and it's not even over there, because then you find out 3 months later you start going through some stuff yourself.
Yeah, so my mom passed away, it was May. In November, I was going to be turning 40.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do the math. I am the age I am. But so my mom passed away. And so I had all the fun doctor appointments set up, and I had my yearly, not yearly, however I got it, because I don't have to get it anymore. I had a mammogram scheduled and ultrasound. And during that appointment, so it was actually 3 months after my mom passed that I had that appointment, is what it was. And they discovered some suspicious calcifications in my breast tissue,
Okay.
which I was diagnosed with something called lobular carcinoma in situ.
Okay.
So it's not a genetic type of breast cancer, a gene related at all, but it made me susceptible for becoming actually being diagnosed with breast cancer.
Possibly getting it in the future.
Right. So I knew this was what was important for me. First of all, I was literally in survival mode. Like I was like barely keeping it together. I wasn't drinking because
Nope.
again, remember, I didn't drink during the hard times. I knew I had to be present, and I knew I had to be strong. And those weren't the times that I would choose to pick up and drink to cover my pain. Plus I knew I was going to have, I had another health scare. I was like, gotta get in shape again. Don't worry about the mental stuff. Physically, I'm going to be strong. So I knew how I mentally had handled my thyroid stuff. And what I forgot to tell you was when I had my thyroid cancer, I took out the left lobe that had the cancer.
Okay.
And it first left the right. And then 6 months later, when I kept worrying about if it was going to come back in the right because the chances were high, I electively had the right one taken out.
Okay.
So I already knew. I was like, you're going to be thinking about this all the time. Like, what are my options? So I had the lumpectomy done. I went for a couple, core biopsies, needle biopsies, like all these miserable appointments. And I just saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, I'm going to be constantly going to doctor appointments and constantly worrying about the what if. I don't want this monkey on my back. And so what can I do? What is the quickest thing I can do to get to the other side of this medical issue? And that for me was to have a double mastectomy with reconstruction. It was like, if I made that choice, the problem's going to be gone. I don't have to be put on this awful medicine and I can just move forward. Like, we got to get out of this bad year. Right.
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And I actually had the surgery in early 2014.
Okay.
So then in early 2014, I had the surgery and then I spent about a year recovering from it. So it's a process having the reconstruction, which I won't go into the detail. That'll actually explain a little bit about how I started writing the book I didn't know I was going to write. I never, ever anticipated writing a book. Like, I flunked out of college. I was like, I'm really bad at focusing on things, but turns out I'm not. I'm really not. And I just, needed to uncover this passion. So what I ended up doing was I ended up journaling about the process of what it was like to have a double mastectomy with reconstruction, what it was like for me, because I felt like if another woman, God forbid, has to go through this, I better take some notes because I knew I was going to forget the details. Yeah. You just do over time. And that's an important thing because people did that for me. I had a couple good girlfriends that took me through what it was like for them.
Okay.
And even showed me, like it was very, very intimate and very generous of them to do that. So I wanted to make sure that I wrote it down somewhere. And that's how that started. So after I started journaling about all of that, I ended up finding myself going through the process of healing from the loss from my mom. I started really writing about what it was like to go through this without her.
Okay.
Because she was there for my thyroid stuff. Yeah. Even though, she was, she drank and, whatever, she was there for me.
Yeah.
She laid in bed with me. She watched movies with me. She went to biopsy appointments with me. She was my emotional rock during that time. She would convince me that I was going to be there to see, Bailey grow to be walk down the aisle. We didn't have to yet. But she was there for me and she wasn't this time. So I was aching for her and that's what I started writing about. So that all happened and I went through the process of the recovery and then I started drinking again when everything was fine. Let's go back to the way life is supposed to be. Yep. Working again, work hard, play hard on the weekends. And I went back to the Valerie that I thought that I was supposed to be. Okay. Go to the dinner parties, have a few cocktails, be fun, be present, be available when I really I wasn't. I never knew what fully present was until I go to dinner parties now as a sober woman.
Yeah. And what about like, say your husband and your kids at this time, are they seeing a change in you at all?
I don't, you know what, John? No one's ever asked me that. And that would be a better question to ask them. It would probably be a better question and a very interesting question to ask my 22-year-old daughter who works in a home for complex mental illness and depression and recovery. So there she is. She just got an award at work the other day.
Oh, and good for her.
She works in a dual diagnosis home.
Okay.
For mental illness and recovery. So I'm super proud of her. There's my husband. There's my son.
Yeah. So they were probably your rock then too, because your mom's not there now. So now going through all this, I'm sure they were your rock to hold on to.
Yeah, they're amazing. And they're just, when I came out with this book in 2020, where are we now? No, we started writing it in 2022, came out in 2022. My son is, he was ending his sophomore year of high school. Can you imagine if your parents said, "Hey, John, how do you feel about me writing this book? Your library is probably going to carry it." And I'm pretty much every shameful thing that I've, done in this little section of my life, because I wrote about this, this section of my life. And his answer was, okay,
Yeah.
it's your story. I'm like,
Nowadays, they're probably looking at it going, I'm not going to be in the library anyways. Do we even have a library anymore? It's all computers.
but yeah, so 2015 to 2017 is when I did start drinking again.
Yeah.
And I will say, to go back to your question, did they notice something? Maybe. I know I did.
Yeah.
What changed for me was my literal physiological change, because I was now not dealing with the trauma of everything that had happened.
Yeah.
I was having a trauma response to alcohol. I'd wake up not only just hungover, if I drank the night before, I would wake up with panic, like a deep, and I always do this when I describe this, because there are no words to describe what true anxiety and panic feel like than this ache feeling in your cavity of your chest for me. And over nothing, like I didn't know, but it was a physical response. And that panic, that state of like angst, because alcoholism is a disease, a dis-ease, led to a period of depression.
Okay.
So those 2 years, 2015 to 2017, were some of the toughest years of my life. And I was working, here's the clincher, check on your strong friends. That's when I had in my professional life, that's when I had my most successful running program.
Okay.
Nobody knew that I was going home on the weekends and just drinking and waking up in complete panic.
And I could be completely wrong, but you correct me if I'm wrong. Do you think now that you look back, or even like in 2017, you got sober, like I think you even said you joined a recovery program. Do you think looking back, that whole period between 2015 and 17 was maybe an escape, because your body now, your mind was starting to start really processing, dealing the passing of your mom in 2013, dealing with your double mastectomy, to healing, and now this was a way to sort of escape all that and something else to tackle where you don't have to think about that stuff anymore.
So you have a picture of me climbing up something, right?
Okay. Yes, I do, somewhere here. Yes.
So this'll, if you're not, okay, so that's me climbing up Mount Washington in New Hampshire, right? Highest peak in New England. And it was the toughest physical feat I've ever challenged myself to. And I've done a few things, in my career. I did that when I was still drinking.
Wow.
Because now again, I wasn't drinking that day and I wasn't drinking most times I was training. But if I had a day where I wasn't training, I probably drank that night,
Okay.
Well, again, I wasn't drinking all the time. But when I did drink, it's always intention. Everything we do in life is about intention.
Yes.
My intention was to get drunk. So I couldn't drink safely anymore. And so anyhow, so it just goes to show you that when people are hurting, it could also look like that. So it can look like overcompensation.
Yeah, because look at the smile on your face. You're enjoying yourself. It's like,
and I genuinely
life is good.
That in that moment, that's one of my happiest memories. But I'm just saying, talking big picture.
No, I know what you mean, though. Exactly.
Yeah, big picture here. That was in the height of my depression.
Yeah.
Because that's what it can look like. It can look like overcompensating.
And I know people like that, where usually that is the way they are on their most depressed times, is you don't know it because it looks like they're doing their most success at that time.
Yeah. So there's this slogan that's in my recovery program that I love. It's like one of my favorites, because for me, thank God, the compulsion or the temptation for alcohol left me very quickly. Like I don't even think about and I don't take it for granted, because if I took it for granted, then I'm just one drink away. So, I keep it in check. But for me, I came in for my drinking. I stayed for my thinking.
Yeah.
And it's taught me, it is the foundation, the absolute foundation for where I am today. So people ask me, like, how did you get, where you are? Well, number one, I had to get sober. Number one. Number one, if I put anything else in front of my sobriety, which I did for years, everything else, including climbing up Mount Washington, then I'm going to lose that too. So when I decided to become sober, it wasn't like an aha moment. Like, okay, there was one particular thing that happened that I don't publicly talk about, and I don't have to, but the big picture is, I decided, you know what? I've tried everything else, everything else, meditation, physical training. I'm like, you know what you need, Valerie. You know, the writing is on the wall. You are doing exactly what your mother did. You are
Yeah.
overcompensating. You're being there for everybody else. Like, you need something to change. And I knew in my heart of hearts I was an alcoholic.
Yeah.
So I went to a recovery program, and I remember them talking about this word surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, like, who are you people? Surrender. Like, what the hell? No, we fight. We
Yeah.
fight. We keep going. We overcompensate. We work hard. We do for others. Like, all of that. And then I was like, oh, okay. You got to surrender control over more than just alcohol.
Yeah.
And that's where I finally found my peace, including trying to find out why my mom died by suicide and what I could have done differently. I
Exactly.
had to let that go.
Yeah. Because you can sit there and rack your brain about that until the
Yep.
day you pass on, and you might not ever find that answer. Nobody can.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's true. So then you get sober and you're going through this recovery program. So what makes it go through your mind that, you know what, all this journaling I'm doing, all these interpersonal things that I'm putting on paper here, I'm just going to now throw that out there for everybody to read. What made that little box go off?
Well, so I switched gears and I changed professions from all the fitness stuff I was doing, and in the new job I was in, we were all home, so I wasn't really working full time anymore. Although I still had maintained employment, which was wonderfully generous of the company I was with. So I had this downtime. And I did a lot of things, and I joke around about, I think that when I built a bushcraft shelter outside in my yard, somebody probably should have come and checked on me. I had a little time on my hands, but I was like, you know what? I don't know. I think I looked on my phone. I was trying to clean things up on my phone, and I had all of these notes on my phone because a lot of times I was at appointments in the doctor's office, and I was like, I'm like, wait a minute. This is some pretty good stuff. So I moved it all to a file on my computer. And then I decided to piece it together into a story, a manuscript. But I was gridlocked because I hadn't written anything,
Okay.
I lost that space from 2015 to present day. You know what I mean? Like I journaled that whole year of right after my mom had passed, and then into 2014. And then 2015 on, I was busy drinking and then I was busy getting sober. I didn't really
Yep.
journal about that. I did other things, but I
Yep.
didn't really journal about that. So I handed the manuscript in as I had it. And I was so grateful because the first editor that worked with me, copy editors don't change anything except for grammatical things. I mean, they literally won't even capitalize a letter without circling it and being like, just so you know, I made this a capital T.
Yeah.
But they will write context like dig deeper, this should go here, this should go down here. And one thing that was missing was who my mom was, like who she was when in that picture that you showed in the beginning of her raising, my sister and I. And the big aha moment when I decided to be like, okay, this really has to be told was when she encouraged me to interview somebody in my family about who my mom was during that time that I was just too young to remember during, when she was in her 20s. So graciously, my Aunt Donna, her sister, who I'm really, really close with, she, I called her up. I'm like, hey, can I come over and ask you some questions about mom? And if it's okay, I'm going to record it because I'm thinking about writing this book. And nobody knew, they didn't even know I had a manuscript because I didn't want to tell anybody until I knew that it might actually go through and be published, right?
Sure.
Because up until this point, and now we're talking 2020, 7 years after losing her, we didn't talk about it ever. And so my aunt was like, yeah, of course, come over. Because of course she wants to talk about her sister.
Exactly.
They were so close. So anyways, long story short, 2 hours later, I'm driving from her house with all of this adrenaline. Like I could understand who she was, as a woman now, if she was my friend, I'd be like, girl, I got you. Like I get you, and I understood her in a way that I hadn't before because I was looking through first of all, a lens of sobriety and also perspective. So I went through and I added some more context to the book.
Hmm.
And then that was a huge, huge step in my healing and my ability to find some true peace.
Very cool. And there's the book right there, Shadow to the Core. So basically, it's your notes just put to paper. It's not anything. It's not. Is it written
It's written
like a
as a story.
journal?
Nope, it's written as a story.
Okay.
Yeah, it's written as a story. And then I had to go back, and fill in like where I am today, which is the final chapter, but not really the final chapter. um, but manuscripts are really, or memoirs are really about a period of your life, and that was a period of my life where I went through some of the worst, because that's the way life likes to go sometimes. None of us are gonna get off this life easy.
No.
Again, I say my story's not unique,
No.
and you don't have to go out there and shout it from the rooftops and write a book, but it is important to share your story. Everyone's got it. We help each other out by telling it. And I just chose to put mine to paper because, frankly, selfishly, it really helped me. But one of the greatest things that's come out of it is, a lot of times books are just a calling card.
Yes.
So it's led me. One of my favorite things to do is this right here. I travel a lot for my full-time job, and I can do podcasts from everywhere. This is like, I just love this so much.
Yes.
Even if it's from my bathroom.
No,
And
even
then,
from your bathroom.
and then going to events like, I just came from an event over the summer where I was at a recovery event, and I just got up, and the whole theme was people were supposed to share their stories of inspiration. So I just got up and told my story.
Yep. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, you answered my next question, which was what was really the real purpose of writing the book and getting it out there. But I think you answered it. It was more of a selfish reason, but at the same time, I think it was something that you thought would help other people.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
like you said, it's not a unique situation you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just look, and people would ask me, do you think your mom would be upset or proud? I know in my heart of hearts, like I just know in my soul that she's completely proud. Like I have no doubt in my mind that things have happened the way they've happened because she's my guardian angel saying, speak about it, because it's when we don't, that people can go down a rabbit hole that they might not be able to dig themselves out of. So there's a lot of things that we can do preventatively that I work towards every single day now and share with other people.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. And you talked a little bit about it, but what are you up to now?
Well, okay, so I do have another job, but I like to volunteer a lot. I do actually also like to be available for speaking events at different things like recovery groups, fitness conventions, on smaller scales and workshop settings. And I love sharing stories of hope and resilience, and then taking it to the next level and sharing a skill set, a method that I call the core fitness and a method. And really it's a combination of what I used to do as a coach, physical coach, and now as a mental health coach as well.
Great, because that was where before we left, I wanted to make sure we brought in about the core fitness or training method. Why don't you tell more about that core training method?
Sure. So that core training method, the acronym CORE stands for, the C is what is your challenge, your crisis that you're in now. Okay. The O stands for outcome. What is the outcome? Like, what do you want at the end of the day? What are your goals? And, sometimes, and this is a whole thing we break down when I meet with people is, I don't coach outcomes, because you could do the next right thing every single day. The outcome is going to be what it's going to be.
Very true.
But you're going to learn the skills to be able to deal with that outcome. What is your R? What is your reason, your motivating factor for sticking with that goal? And the E stands for execution. What are the skills? What are the tools that you're going to pick up? So my challenge, let's just use something like, my challenge is I'm an alcoholic. I'm in recovery. I'm a recovering alcoholic. So one thing I'm going to pick up every single day is my recovery program in my skill set. I believe mental health, again, is, a health issue. I'm not in active depression. For me, it's in remission. Okay. but I do know to keep it in remission, one of the skills I'm going to pick up and execute every day is exercise. So when people are frustrated and they're just like, well, that won't work for me. One thing I love asking people is, okay, well, you've tried that. No, I heard you. I get it. You're still going through this. What is the one tool that you're afraid to pick up to get the outcome that you're looking for? Yeah. What is one thing you haven't tried? And for me, for so many years, it was a recovery program. And that was the game changer for me.
Because there's always something out there for somebody.
Yep.
To help you get through it. And like I said, even if it's just talking to somebody, that can be your change right there. So I know we're coming up to the hour, just past the hour.
I couldn't believe it's been an hour. I was like, look.
I was just looking. It's like just almost right on the hour. But is there anything else you wanted to add?
I used the bathroom when I was sitting here.
Yeah, if you say, excuse me, I got to use the bathroom, please, like shut your camera off. And
yeah, I'll remember to do that.
Is there anything you'd like to add, though, to anybody that's watching this to just help them through that, that's going through some of the situations you're talking about in this whole podcast?
Yeah, reach out in some capacity. If you're home and you're shut in and you're not getting out there are private Facebook groups that are wonderful for people struggling with mental health issues that are completely private and you can post anonymously. So look for those. If you have reached out, and this is important, and it's been met with a little bit of, not the support that you thought you were going to get, it is not any reflection on you. And I want to say that because there were times where I reached out and that friend wasn't there and it had no reflection on me. It was just, they weren't in the place that they could have been for maybe their own reasons. So on to the next person. I have faith that people will come into your life for a reason. And that person is there for you. You just got to reach out. And if you're in a state of severe depression, seek help. I believe in therapists. I believe in talk therapy. I believe in medicine if it's needed. Again, psychologists, psychiatrists deal with medicine for the brain. This is a disease of the brain, and medical professionals are available and talented to help.
Definitely. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And I want to reiterate what Logan Horgan Ongley says, and it says, thank you, Val.
Oh my God, I love her. Hi, Logan. I love her.
So she obviously liked the podcast.
Here, but
but I want to thank you for coming. I want to tell people how they can get in touch with you. So I have like your website, ValerieJWalsh.com. Is that where they can purchase your book?
Yep. They can buy it on Amazon as well, Barnes & Noble online, anywhere where books are sold. But if they go directly to my website, they will also get the link right there as well. They can sign up for emails too.
Sounds great. And you have linkedin.com/in/ValerieJWalsh. I have Facebook.com Core Fitness Method. So those are all ways that they can get in touch with you. And I recommend you, I'm actually going to be going out and buying that book. And I'm going to ask you for an autograph copy, of course.
Of course.
So we'll talk about that later, but I'm definitely going to get your book. It's one of the first podcasts that I've done where I haven't actually had a chance to read the person's book first. So I'm glad I got to hear your story first, and it'll put a lot of stuff in perspective, I'm sure, when I read the book. So
yeah, that's almost in some ways neater.
Yeah, exactly. So, no, I think you've thrown a lot of information out there for people that are going through it. I know your story, and just going out there and just telling people about it and writing about it, it's going to help so many people. And we need more people like you that are willing to talk about it. And let's try and get out there and help with the stigma of mental health. I mean, especially during the last 2.5, 3 years, the way this world's gone, the mental health, if it wasn't bad before, it's gone skyrocket since then. So
it is, it's weeks to get in with a doctor because we're still in an active epidemic. So I encourage you to reach out to a friend in the meantime.
Exactly. So I want to thank you for coming on, and maybe in a little while after we've done a lot more podcasting, maybe in about a year or so, you'll come back and we'll talk again, and you can reiterate about what you do.
Second book.
There you go. I was going to ask you if there's a second one in you still.
Oh yeah, I want to share other people's stories, so that's the plan.
That's awesome. So if you want to see more about Valerie, go to her website, find her on Facebook, and it was a true treat. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all you're doing, John.
No, thank you. And to everybody else out there, I want to thank you for coming on to another episode of Butler's Babble, when we'll next month come to you with another person that will help to try and share to empower you, motivate, and inspire you to be the best person that you can be. And remember, until the next time, if anybody asks, say the Butler did it.